My dad was one of those guys who would not accept the blame for anything when the culpability lay with him. He wasn't very good at saying sorry. But there was one incident that stands out in my mind. The summer of '83, I was at primary school, and back in those days, Lambeth had a lot of squats. It was a very sort of bleak time in the borough. And if you were growing up back then, there were loads of derelict sites, loads of boarded up houses. And my primary school was in Clapham, St Alphonsus Road. And again, so many squats there. And we were in assembly one morning, and the new assembly hall faced out onto the road. And I could see through the window behind me a postman had knocked on a door where some squatters lived. And this guy pushed up the old sash window and he was completely naked. Young guy, probably in his 20s at the time. His genitalia actually made contact with the ledge. Now, in a previous video this week, I recalled an incident when one of the waiters at my cafe was opening his window as I made my way up to the cafe on South Lambeth Road, and I looked up. I did that thing, I was distracted by the window audio. I looked up and I saw him topless, and I had to work hard to build bridges after that. And I was saying on that video, you don't open your window topless. This guy, though, back in '83, he opened his window completely naked, so he's got the genitalia on the ledge. I can't remember if there was some package or letter for him to collect from the postman, but the guy's face just stayed with me. I never forgot it. So this must have been just before we broke up for the summer at school. Now, the area as a whole, Clapham, Stockwell, it was starting to change. We were starting to get the first influx of yuppies coming into the area, and I remember asking my mum why I could suddenly see into neighbours' houses. It's because net curtains were being lost to the community. The yuppies were coming in and bringing their blinds, which they wouldn't close till, 10, 11 at night. And it was just really strange getting my head around that. So a lot of the houses were owned by immigrant landlords and were filled up with immigrants living in bedsits. You could get 7 or 8 bedsits in any one building. And suddenly these houses were being carved up into flats, 3 flats per house. And my dad, who was a painter and decorator by then, was starting to get a lot of work through some Spanish guys who were moving into the building trade. And right at the top of our road, there was one such house being done up, and my dad went to work for this guy, and the thinking was that this could be a big break for him. I don't think he was happy working for the company that he was working with. This was a Spanish guy that he could be working with. There were opportunities there to be taken if he so wished. And one evening he took me to the house as it was at the top of our road. He was working extra hours. He'd go and see how things were getting on. He took me with him, and the owner's son was there, who was a bit younger than me. And I realised that same night that one of my dad's new colleagues was the squatter who lived opposite my school, who had opened his window completely naked to the postman. And I couldn't believe it. And I wasted no time at all in telling the little kid, who then wasted no time at all in telling this guy, naked man, who was an Italian, telling him that I had said that I had seen him naked opening his window to a postman. And word quickly got back to my dad, and he was completely dismayed. And he took me to one side and he just said, "Why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't you come to me with this information? Why did you have to tell that little boy? Look what's happened now. How can I work with these guys? How can I work with this guy now when he knows that you have told this kid that you've seen him naked? How can I build some sort of working relationship with this guy?" And on reflection, I suppose, had I been a bit older, well, I wouldn't have told this little kid. But I still, to this day, think, you're a little kid yourself. Your dad's new work colleague is a man that you have seen completely naked. It's I don't even think a segue to lead you into this kind of conversation with your dad works. I mean, to this day, I find myself thinking, I don't know how I could have made this work. My dad didn't work on another assignment with this particular team, which I think he was disappointed about, and he certainly blamed me for. And I think it's the one time where I can, hold my hands up and say, yeah, that was, that one was on me. And who knows, had I kept my mouth shut, had that man not opened his window naked, what opportunities might have come through for my dad as a painter and decorator in mid 80s Clapham, as the area began to change and the yuppies moved in.